Hey, how's it going everybody, and welcome back. We have an exciting video today as we get another chance to look at the upcoming Dawn of America project. The devs have been kind enough to work with me and release a bunch of information on the mod, as well as a current build of the mod so that we can actually take a look at some of the stuff in game. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of the new lore and information that's been released, as well as have some footage playing in the background of some of the really cool locations that have been added via this mod in the most current build. It is important to keep in mind that this is still a work in progress project, so some things may be subject to change, but a lot of this stuff is pretty cemented, so just keep that in mind just in case things change by final release. For starters, in case you're new to the Dawn of America project or missed out on the last video that we covered this in, Dawn of America is going to be an expansive questline that is going to bring the Enclave into the Commonwealth and explain what they've been up to and what their plan is now that they've returned. This mod is specifically going to bridge the gap between Chicago and the Commonwealth and explain how the Enclave is going to react to new factions like the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute. On top of an expansive questline, this mod is going to add a ton of new items, armors, weapons, and locations, some of which being their own custom assets, and others being shared assets with other Enclave mods like Lima Detachment by Colonel Mustard. Now, a lot of this information we already knew. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the newly released lore that will take place in this project. In Dawn of America, the Enclave did more than just survive their defeat at Washington. They thrived. Immediately following the destruction of Adams Air Force Base, Operation Ghost Town was enacted. It ordered all Enclave personnel across America to reach Chicago, destroying all evidence of Enclave involvement in the wasteland along the way. Small bunkers scattered from coast to coast evacuated their respective areas, protecting Enclave secrets via a slash and burn mindset as they traveled. Chicago itself was mainly a home for the high-profile and non-combatant sections of the Enclave prior to Fallout 3. Families, government officials, those defending the city's inhabited areas, etc. But after the fall of both Raven Rock and Adams, it stood as the last stable bastion of Enclave influence in the wasteland, and the remaining members of Enclave High Command intended to keep it that way. Vice President Noah Grace led the consolidation of power within Chicago, effectively abandoning those soldiers and civilians who were unable or unwilling to comply. By the next year, Chicago stood alone. And that was how things went for nearly a decade. The inhabited areas of the city grew to accommodate these refugees, expanding farther beyond Naval Station Great Lakes and its massive pre-war Naval Command bunker. The ancient city wasn't entirely repopulated, but portions of the area surrounding the naval station saw some growth over the years. The Enclave endured a time of relative peace within their walls, once again seeing the positives of living life in isolation. Despite that peace, conflict came quickly. Though it didn't come from outside. After Colonel Autumn's disappearance during the Brotherhood siege of Project Purity, his support amongst the Enclave didn't disappear alongside him. A good number of citizens believed in Autumn, given the history of legendary service that both he and his father share. Those individuals following his disappearance did not see the newly elected President Grace as a suitable leader, a career politician with neither the battlefield experience of Autumn nor the long-standing trust of Eden. Grace's biggest claim to fame was his rise to power, rather than the actions once he got it. The political landscape turned into a shattered glass pane, dozens of political factions vying for power and influence, each taking a bit of those away from Grace by simply existing. Congress came to a dead stop as nobody could agree on major decisions. Protests became commonplace near the later half of the decade, both within the government and amongst the greater populace. This disunity proved to be one of the main reasons that Chicago fell so easily. In the latter half of 2287, the long-separated Midwestern Brotherhood of Steel launched a surprise attack on the city from the tunnel system beneath its ruins, cutting off patrols and isolating areas outside the naval station before moving in further. The divided Enclave struggled to organize a defense in time, losing hundreds of lives before finally making the decision to evacuate the city. The Enclave left Chicago behind, sending scouts across America to find a new home, and this is how the sole survivor will first encounter them, by tracking a beacon that leads to one of said scouts. While tracking the beacon, the sole survivor will reach Fort Hagen, alongside a group of gunners and Enclave remnants who are amidst a firefight. And that is where the story truly begins for the player in Dawn of America. It's important to note that the Enclave that the player first sees in the start of this mod will not be a fractured ideological mess, as a lot of time has passed since Chicago. President Grace has made many changes with the intention of removing the divisiveness that kept the stronghold vulnerable. As you can see, a lot of time and effort has been put into just the background of this mod, so we have a lot to look forward to when it comes to the outline of the rest of the quests. While we don't have specific information on the exact lore of the rest of the questline, we do have a nice general outline that they have provided thus far. At this moment, we have 4 parts of the main quest outline, starting with Part 1, The Old Guard. This set of quests will be about when the Enclave first arrives in Massachusetts, when they have not yet gained a lot of influence and they are an entirely new faction in the Commonwealth, where the player will help them sort of gain their ground. Which leads us to Part 2, Gaining Traction. This begins the Enclave's expansion, establishing outposts and patrols, and doing missions to gather intel on the Commonwealth and its inhabitants. As the Enclave gets settled in, we move into Part 3, the Rising Storm. Threats begin to catch up with the Enclave, with more direct confrontations between them and their enemies, as the Enclave still grasps onto maintaining a strong foundation in Massachusetts. Which brings us to Part 4, the Dawn of America. The Enclave proceeds to full-scale war with their enemies, hunting down the remnants of other factions and cementing their hold on the Commonwealth. So as you can see, Dawn of America is going to bring the Enclave in as a real, proper faction, and does so in a nice way. Rather than pretending they've been there all along, you instead find them when they're first beginning, and help them build their establishment in the Commonwealth, which I think is a great way to introduce them. As we move on down the line here, the creators have actually provided me with some information on some of the main characters you'll encounter, as well as some descriptions of their behaviors and key points. Starting with Major Scott Mitchell. Major Mitchell is the leader of the Lone Stars. An aging battlefield commander, the Major has managed to keep his crew of survivors intact despite their steady losses over the last decade. Despite being the squad's leader at the start of the mod, he doesn't stay that way for long. Upon the Enclave's arrival in the Commonwealth, he is made Acting Secretary of Defense by President Grace. Once he's promoted, his role changes from squad leader to the one coordinating the Enclave's military efforts in the Commonwealth. Then we have Sergeant Adam Locke. Sergeant Locke is Mitchell's second in command upon first meeting the squad, but after Mitchell's promotion, Locke is made the squad leader of the Lone Stars. As the longest surviving member of the team, one of the original remnants to join up with Major Mitchell after the fall of the Enclave in Washington, D.C., he's got experience working with everyone on the team, except for the player and specialist Eckhart. Adam is incredibly loyal to the Enclave, almost to a fault, and his loyalty will prove to be both a great strength and a great weakness for his character as well as the rest of the team. Before joining up with the Lone Stars, he was leading a team in D.C. shortly after the destruction of Adams Air Force Base that found Major Mitchell in a last stand against a group of ambitious Talon-Comp mercenaries. They saved his life, and the Major has led the team ever since, and Locke has been his second in command. Moving on, we have Corporal Daisy Gallagher. Corporal Gallagher is, well, the team mom of the group. She makes sure to take care of everybody on the team, as well as playing the part of their resident mechanic. Before joining up with the Lone Stars, she was found by Mitchell's group while attempting to integrate into a backwater town as their mechanic. Her unique knowledge of military robotics and skill with a laser pistol suggested she'd receive military training, and after that it didn't take long for her to reveal herself as former Enclave. Her reasons for leaving the town are uncertain, but she has been with the Lone Stars ever since. We then have Private Gabriella Mcneil. Private Mcneil is a gun connoisseur, a master of automatic fire rates, and a prime example of nigh psychotic violence in human beings. She's super sweet and often a flirt, but despite that, she's vehemently against working with Private Granger. Mcneil was born in Enclave territory at Chicago, but ended up moving to Raven Rock at a young age. She escaped the destruction of Raven Rock with another group of survivors that attempted to continue to fight against their enemies despite the odds being heavily stacked against them. When her group met Mitchell's and continued their crusade, she stayed behind with the Lone Stars. Next up, we have Private Wesley Granger. Private Granger is the team scout. Funny, likable, carefree. He was pretty popular growing up at Raven Rock, absorbing all of the pre-war and post-war entertainment he could, music, television, old films, etc., all of which his parents gathered up with ancient recordings. Whether they knew it or not, they shaped Wesley's persona into what he was today. Granger was born and raised in Raven Rock, got into the military as a field scout, and survived the fall of the Enclave in D.C. due to a scouting mission he'd been sent on, just one day prior to Raven Rock's destruction. He joined up with the Lone Stars a few months after Private Mcneil did, making him the most recent member of the team until the sole survivor. Finally, that brings us to Specialist James Eckhart. Specialist Eckhart is the squad's resident genius, a prodigy when it comes to computers. He was born at Raven Rock but was transferred to Adams Air Force Base at a young age to work on a number of Enclave projects, including the Duraframe Reinforcement Project, and later the Hellfire Armor Project. He's quiet, eccentric, and generally an ass, but also contains a darkness inside him from his time in the Enclave. After surviving the destruction of Adams Air Force Base, he joins up with the Lone Stars shortly after the sole survivor. As another newcomer to the group, he and the sole survivor have something in common, but that's about where those similarities end. They both have to accept the team as their own, much like the team has accepted both of them. And there we have it. That is a whole bunch of info dump that we have for the Dawn of America project. But it doesn't end there. We do have some frequently asked questions since the first video that have come out that the devs have gone ahead and answered for us here that we can explain in this video so you don't need to ask them yourselves. For starters, a question I see asked all the time, is this project affiliated with America Rising? No. Although there are some shared assets, this is not part of the America Rising project. These are two completely separate stories. Next question. What does this version of the Enclave use in terms of armor? As it stands, the Enclave is going to be using the classic advanced power armor, along with plasma weaponry for the more advanced tiers of the military, and laser weaponry for the army and everyone else. This mod will utilize a lot of features from Gear of the Enclave, Scientists will get to use a recreated version of the Enclave lab suits from Fallout 3. The Secret Service will use the experimental P-94 plasma rifles. And as you may have seen before, there will be a recreated Fallout 3 style vertibird. Next question. Is this Enclave purist or reformist? The answer is neither. They're the Enclave. A leader's goals might differ, but they're still the same elitist, power-focused people at their core. The devs state that their Enclave resembles most closely the Enclave seen in Fallout 2, though without the logical faults. Another question I see asked very often is how is this mod going to connect with the main storyline of Fallout 4? And this is a multi-part answer. While playing through this mod's main questline, you'll notice that many of the same story beats from the Institute and Brotherhood questlines occur in the background. The Brotherhood will still go into the Sentinel site Prescott, a battle still occurs in the beryllium agitator at Mass Fusion, etc. Rather than being directly involved with these events, the player simply hears about them. While the Brotherhood knows that the Enclave poses a serious threat, they are still dedicated to their fight against the Institute, and rather than splitting their forces and fighting on two fronts, they take their fight to the Institute. As for the Institute themselves, they have a history of conflict with the Enclave, but simply don't think that they pose a sizable enough threat given their expansive list of failures and past losses. In short, the Enclave's main questline is sort of a bystander of the Institute-Brotherhood conflict. That being said, the quest will bring you into direct conflict with the Brotherhood and the Institute at times, while also allowing the Enclave to do its own thing. This is going to significantly lighten the workload so that we don't have to come up with a new Destroy the Enclave section of each of the other factions' main quests. As for the other factions, how are the Railroad and the Minutemen going to be involved with the Enclave in any way, either as enemies or as allies? The short answer is that they won't really interact, but for good reason. As for the Minutemen, the faction depends entirely on the player's input as to whether or not they even become a viable faction. Because of this, including them as a main part of the Enclave questline would be a little silly, especially since it's based on the player's choice. The two factions can coexist, but they aren't forced to cooperate. As for the Railroad, that one is pretty simple. The Railroad's main goal is caring for the Synths, and the Enclave doesn't really care about the Synths. Their goal is to establish a foothold in the Commonwealth, not start a holy war. While not particularly fond of the Railroad, the Enclave isn't too concerned with them existing. There are just far more important things on their plate. With factions out of the way, let's move on to another question. Will there be a Frank Horrigan-esque character? And the answer is no. People ask so much that it's not even funny anymore. That being said, the Department of Wartime Research tries to bring something similar back, but with only moderate success. Speaking of past characters, will there be a screaming Sergeant Dornan replica? No, there are many sergeants, but none like him. Another question I see quite often, can we complete the main game with the Enclave? Yes! Despite what we said earlier about the Enclave being a bystander, they are only a bystander of the ongoing war. That being said, they can come out on top in the Commonwealth. Are any of the characters in Dawn of America going to be romanceable? No. Will there be side quests? Also no, at least not at launch. They may be released in a post-launch update, but that depends on whether or not the team chooses to stay after the main questline is completed. Are there going to be companions in Dawn of America? And the answer is complicated. At this moment, there's nobody to convert these squad mates into actual companions. That being said, they will be sort of companions along the quest journey. So they won't be proper companions that you can take with you on your own, but they will be on your side when you're doing other quests. Another big question, how close is this mod to completion? And there really isn't an answer for that. Mods like this take a very long amount of time, and so trying to come up with an answer would just be a shot in the foot. For the time being, the main focus is going to be making sure this is the best mod it can be. Another question, will the Enclave use the Institute's teleportation technology and synths? The answer is no. While that may be a bummer, the devs believe that it would ruin the tone and thematic consistency of the faction. That being said, both technologies will be evaluated by the Enclave at the end of the main questline, but there won't be any conclusive result in-game. And then the final question, which is probably asked more than anything else, will this mod be available on Xbox? And the answer is no. And bottom line, the file size is just going to be too large. With a 2 gig limit on Xbox, you can't really do much in the way of gigantic overhauls like this one, so it will not be available on Xbox, sad as that is to hear. Now with all that out of the way, there is one more bit that we can go over, and that is how you guys can help. Last time we did plug that they were looking for some new team members, and they still are, but for very specific positions. So, if you'd like to join on with the Dawn of America project, the team is currently looking for creation kit techs, scripters, animators, people who have experience with version control, and most importantly, experience is required. So please, if you're going to apply, bring something to show for it. So if you are looking to apply, I'll have a link to their Discord down below where you can go to the recruitment section. Again, because this is an important part, experience is required. So, with that, I think that wraps up everything. I hope you guys enjoyed all of this new information. I hope it brings some new hype to the Dawn of America project. This thing is shaping up to be a really cool overhaul and definitely something super crazy. Now, even if you're not looking to apply, there is a link down to the Dawn of America Discord down below where you can get new dev updates as well as some really cool images of stuff they're working on. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, drop a rating, subscribe if you haven't already for more videos just like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace! And really quick, I'd like to make a shout out to all of our patrons. Your donations are greatly appreciated and really help to support the channel and videos just like this one. So again, thank you.